agent for his appointees accused of corruption as it reviews the trial of 21 NDC officials accused of corruption to the tune of more than 700 million cedis.
It is not my job to clear or convict any person accused of wrongdoing or of engaging in acts of corruption. My job is to act on allegations of corruption.
We have details as the president mounts a strong defense of his anti-corruption record.
This is Top Story with Evans Mensah.
And Top Story is always brought to you by Bond Savings and Loans. Your success, our passion, also brought to you by Gasem Cement, the nation builder, and Vodafone. The future is exciting. Ready. It is not my job to clear or convict. My job is to act on allegations of corruption. That is President Akufo-Addo today, fighting off opposition accusations of being a clearing agent for his appointees accused of corruption. He also disclosed today that 21 officials of the NDC administration under John Mahama are standing trial right now for alleged acts of corruption or causing financial loss to the state, amounting collectively to the tune of some 772 million cedis. We have more on that shortly. But first, listen to the president defend his record when it comes to anti-corruption.
I'm aware of the orchestrated attempts by my opponents to hang the tag of corruption on the necks of my government and myself, despite all the manifest efforts being made to deal with the phenomenon of corruption. I just have one simple answer for them. It will not work. I did not come into public life to enrich myself. So far, every single alleged act of corruption leveled against any of my appointees has been investigated by independent bodies such as SRAJ, the CID, and in some cases by Parliament itself. From the allegations against the then Minister-designate for Energy at his parliamentary confirmation hearings, to that against the former CEO of BOST, to those against the two deputy chiefs of staff, to the conflict of interest allegations against the Minister for Finance, to the claims of extortion against the Trade and Industry Minister, to allegations of doubling in visa racketeering against the then Deputy Minister for Youth and Sports, the then Director General of the National Sports Authority, who even though exonerated by the CID later resigned, and the chairperson of the board of the National Sports Authority, to the allegations of bribery leveled against the secretary to the Interministerial Committee on Illegal Mining, to the latest involving the suspended acting CEO of the Public Procurement Authority, PPA, and the dismissed CEO of the National Youth Authority. They have all been investigated or are being investigated by the authorized institutions of the state and not by President Akufo-Addo. It is not my job to clear or convict any person accused of wrongdoing or of engaging in acts of corruption. My job is to act on allegations of corruption by referring the issue or issue to the proper investigative agencies for the relevant inquiry and necessary action. This is exactly what has been done.
He also gave this update about his administration's efforts at enhancing and resourcing the many state agencies that have been set up to fight corruption.
Government systematically increased the funding for the accountability institutions of our state, such as Parliament, the Judiciary, the Office of the Attorney General, SRAJ, and the Auditor General. 2017 witnessed a 25% increase in allocations to these five institutions over those of 2016. 2018 witnessed a 34% increase over 2017, and the 2019 mid-year budgetary allocation is virtually at par with 2018. Indeed, the Auditor General on 18th June this year, when thanking government for the, quote, the substantial increase in support, unquote, his outfit received, said, and I quote, the executive has played its part. I hope you are aware, when there was a change in government, the first announcement we heard was a ban on procurement of vehicles. Is that not it? But this was the time government gave us the permission to buy 34 vehicles to support the audit service. We had never bought 10 vehicles in the history of the audit service before, unquote. We have fulfilled the campaign promise to establish an independent office of special prosecutors to focus on the prosecution of corruption-related offenses. The office is up and running manned by an experienced, well-known prosecutor who, we are all aware, has been an active member of the opposition National Democratic Congress and cannot be described by any stretch of the imagination as a member or sympathizer of my party, the ruling New Patriotic Party.
So the president today, for the very first time, disclosed just how many appointees of the John Mahama administration are currently being tried for either corruption or causing financial loss to the state. He also gave us what these corruption allegations and allegations of causing financial loss to the state amounts to. More than 700 million cedis. What is exactly his point there? Listen to him.
So far, 21 officials of the previous administration are standing trial over their involvement in alleged acts of corruption or causing financial loss to the state, amounting collectively to the tune of some 772 million cedis. Their trials are being conducted in the normal manner, with the safeguards that the law affords all accused persons, so that due process is respected. The courts will at the appropriate moment deliver their verdicts. Of the PPA surrounding its suspended acting CEO, 2.75 billion Ghana cedis has been saved for the public exchequer from January 2017 to July 2019 as a result of the PPA reviewing contracts brought before it for approval, either under sole sourcing or restrictive tendering processes. This is in sharp contrast to the performance of the PPA in the years before 2017, when approvals were given as a matter of course and no savings achieved at all. An isolated case in point is the contract awarded in 2016 for the supply of 250,000 bags of Asasura cocoa fertilizer. The contract's sum amounted to 11.5 million United States dollars, i.e. $4 to $6 per bag of fertilizer. This same contract, under my administration, was reviewed by the PPA in 2018 for 7.87 million United States dollars, i.e. 31.50 cents per bag, resulting in a savings to the exchequer of 3.6 million United States dollars. There are many such examples. Indeed, only 47% of applications for restricted tender and 56% of applications for sole sourcing were approved in 2017, as opposed to approvals of 99% for restricted tender and 96% for sole sourcing in 2016. The data for 2018 will be made available soon, but I am confident that they will mirror those of 2017. The Akufo-Addo government is committed to fighting corruption, not just in words, but more importantly in deeds.
On the line with me right now is the Deputy Chief of Staff, Mr. Abu Jinapo. Mr. Jinapo, thank you for your time here on Top Story.
Thank you very much, Evans, and thank you for having me. I say good evening to your cherished listeners.
The president was today, went out all guns blazing, defending his record, fighting off allegations that he's a clearing agent. Let's look at some of the specific cases that he put forward today. He seemed really worried about the tag that the opposition had designed for him as a clearing agent.
Well, the president is not worried. The president was a guest of honor at the 2019 annual conference of the Ghana Bar Association. And the theme for the conference was, and I quote, enhancing national security through the rule of law, prospects and challenges, end quote. The president talked about various issues. He talked about law and order. He talked about patriotism. He talked about corruption. He talked about media freedom and a few other issues that he brought to the attention of the conference. In the case of corruption, the president stated what is the known time-tested approach to fighting corruption globally, which is building, strengthening state institutions, putting a proper legal framework in place, ensuring that there's accountability, enforcing our laws, and leading by example. And at the conference today, the president eloquently set out the efforts his government has made over the past 2.5 years in dealing with this age-old canker of corruption. And I think he spoke for himself, and he spoke very eloquently and persuasively on all fronts, whether it's a question of increasing the budgetary allocation to accountability state institutions or ensuring that public officials who are accused of corruptions and corruption-related offenses are investigated by state institutions, and he cited all of them. And I haven't heard anyone dispute that. I myself and my colleague were subjected to CID investigations and SHRAJ investigations. Several other government appointees and officials who've been accused of acts of corruption have been investigated by state institutions. Past government officials have been made to account for their stewardship. As many as 21 people are in court for causing financial loss or acts of corruption, which amounts to the sum of 772 million Ghana cedis. But even if I may add, the business of opposition, particularly the opposition we have now, that if you want, whatever they are involved in is absolutely contrived and deliberate, well-orchestrated attempt to make the government look bad. I mean, it's obvious. There's no doubt about that. And the government is not worried about the machinations of the opposition. What the government is focused and interested in is how to put in place the right measures. For instance, the passage of the Right to Information Act, the setting up of the Office of Special Prosecutor, enforcing our procurement laws, and instilling discipline and accountability in the government system to ensure that we're able to win this fight against corruption. The opposition, they will go on and on and on. Even when people have been investigated and cleared by state institutions such as SHRAJ and by other recognized and legally mandated state institutions, they'll still cite them and call them corruption scandal, saga. It's all about politics and it's about votes for the opposition. That's what they are looking for. But what the president sought to address today before an orchestra such as the Ghana Bar Association was to lay out his government strategy for fighting corruption, what has been done so far, what is being done, and what will be done going into the future.
Now, he makes the point that his job is to act when people have been involved in corruption. One of the cases he cites today is the very latest one. Because this is fresh on people's minds, I want to bring it up. He cites it himself, the case of the Youth Authority, the dismissal of all the executives there. He says that he didn't tell us any detail, but asked that to the corruption list and says, I've acted by dismissing them. Question is, and he talks about transparency. Question is, we don't know what they did. And the real question there is it enough to simply dismiss without even telling the people he is supposed to account to what these officers did, for which reason they've been sacked, so we can judge if dismissal is enough?
Well, first of all, I've been involved in that matter. A petition was lodged to the BNI. Some preliminary investigations was conducted into the stewardship of the management of the National Youth Authority. In the judgment of the president, sufficient grounds have been established for them to be dismissed. The next steps that will have to follow, I believe that this matter came up sometime last week. It's early days yet. I believe that if the interrogation is done and assessment is done, and there's the need for investigative state bodies to get into this matter, it will be done. Just as it has been the case in all the other allegations which have been leveled in the past. For instance, the PPA issue. The president got the boss of the PPA to be suspended. He was satisfied that enough basis has been established for the suspension and enough basis has been established for, in the case of corruption, for it to be referred to the Office of the Special Prosecutor, and in the case of potential conflict of interest to be referred to SHRAJ. But even it's also important for us to make this point and make it forcefully. In a democratic system such as ours, a president has limitations because we all of us as a people have, by consensus, agreed to be governed under the principle and dictates of rule of law. And the dictates of rule of law, one of the cardinal principles of the rule of law is a man is presumed innocent until proven guilty. And the president has limitations when it comes to allegations of wrongdoing or corruption. And as the president rightly put it, his is to ensure that when these matters come to his attention, he acts decisively and ensures that people are taken through due process of accountability. And on each occasion, on all the occasions of allegations of corruption, the president has done so. But it's also important for me to point out, and I'm not about to engage in the discussion of comparing and contrasting, which is that ours is to govern and offer leadership to deal with this debilitating phenomenon of corruption. But we didn't just drop from the moon. We've been in this country before, and we've been here not so long ago, 3 years ago, when there were blatant acts of corruption. And all the president at the time and the government at the time will do, even when people have been investigated and indicted and to be reassigned to the presidency. That is not what is happening here. In the case of President Akufo-Addo, he is even referring officials from his own presidency for thorough investigation.
Having said that, Mr. Janapo, can you clarify this for me? The president mentions that too. In the case of the Interministerial Committee on Illegal Mining, the case of your own colleague, the secretary, who was investigated and subsequently had to resign. The many who say he's still on the payroll as a presidential staffer. Is he or is he not?
Mr. Bisu is a presidential staffer. Mr. Bisu, Evans, but that is the point. And the president talked about that in his speech. Mr. Bisu is not being found culpable for any offense. He's not been indicted.
But that process is not complete, is it?
No, hold on. There's been an allegation against Mr. Bisu. In fact, the CID has investigated and submitted its reports. The matter is still before the special prosecutor. The special prosecutor is investigating that matter. Mr. Bisu had to resign from the Interministerial Committee on Small-Scale Mining because his presence as the secretary of the Interministerial Committee for Small-Scale Mining had the potential of interfering with investigations. He's had to resign as the secretary. When I was subjected to investigations at the CID and charge, I didn't resign. I wasn't suspended. The fact that an allegation has been leveled against you does not necessarily mean that you have to. It is only when your office has the potential of interfering with the investigation. That is where good governance principles will require that you step aside, you are dismissed, or you are suspended. Being a presidential staffer, I don't know how that is going to interfere with the investigations ongoing at the Office of Special Prosecutor. I don't see it. But being a secretary to the Interministerial Committee, one can say that if he continues to be a secretary, if documents are requested for, interrogations are made in that committee or that office, he probably has the potential of interfering with the investigation. And it's also very important, Ivan, that even in the case of past officials, as the president rightly said, 21 of them are standing trial before our court.
Well,
in respect of charges potentially amounting to 772 million Ghana cedis, but they are entitled to due process.
Well, you mentioned
all the protections that an accused person is entitled.
You mentioned your position, and the president deliberately reserves some significant part of this to deal with what he believes to be an unfair tagging of him as a clearing agent. I want to bring in the spokesperson for the NDC, the National Communications Officer for the party, who's also joining us right now, Mr. Sami Jemfi. Mr. Jemfi, thank you for your time here on Top Story.
Thanks for having me.
You've heard the president today. Your reaction?
Let me first of all say that the president was very dishonest today relative to what he claimed to be his efforts and his commitment to the fight against corruption. Evans, corruption has become a palpable reality in the Akufo-Addo government. So President Akufo-Addo must understand that no desperate attempt to whitewash or purge himself of corruption will wash. Ghanaians have seen, the unprecedented levels of corruption in his government. And I think that it will be better for him to accept the reality that he has failed, begin to punish corruption in his government, amend his ways of engaging in corruption himself, and promoting and endorsing same on the part of his officials. That is what we expect from him, and not the blatant falsehoods.
But isn't that what he's done? And he lists a litany of cases. He's referred to either the BNI, CID, SHRAJ, even special prosecutor, people who are either been dismissed, have resigned, or simply been cleared because the independent institutions say they've done nothing wrong. This is a man who also have set up the special prosecutor, first time in the history of Ghana. How can you say that he is not fighting corruption?
No,
that's his
it
argument.
cannot be true either. When the Bost scandal broke, and we learnt of the fact that 5 million letters of an important state asset, fuel, had been sold to unlicensed businesses in breach of the Public Procurement Act and the MPA Act. President Akufo-Addo did not wait for the investigative committee that had been constituted at the time to even commence investigations into the matter. He cleared Mr. Alfred Obeng of any wrongdoing in the matter at an encounter with the press. Today we know that he was wrong because Boss's own investigative findings have discovered that what happened was criminal. It was in violation of the NPA Act and the PPA Act. And the fact that to date, not a dime from that transaction has been paid into the state coffers. What has President Akufo-Addo done about this investigative report by Bost? Secondly, it cannot be true. You know what you're saying cannot be true because we were all in this country when Shrag investigated the Kembond saga, the 2.25 Eurobond saga, and made adverse findings against the finance minister for breaching the issuance guidelines of the Bank of Ghana in raising that bond and breaching Article 181 of the 1992 Constitution and Section 56 of the Public Financial Management Act. Till date, President Akufo-Addo has not acted on that.
But wasn't that subject of another court challenge? The Attorney General did challenge that, right? Those findings, those adverse findings, were subject of another court challenge.
It was only the findings which had to do with the finance minister's non-declaration of his assets, which he went to court to fight. But I'm talking about other findings which were made by Shrag against him for breaching the Constitution, for breaching the Public Financial Management Act, and so on. We are talking about the Australian visa fraud scandal, which was investigated by the CID and ambit under, the Ghana Police Service, which is headed by the IGP appointed by the President, reports to the Interior Minister, and by extension, the President of Ghana. Till date, we do not know the content of the alleged report which cleared Mr. Pius Hajide of wrongdoing in that matter. If for nothing at all, we know that he was the head of the Australian Commonwealth Games. A report compiled by his own minister, Honorable Esiama, indicted him because he was the leader of that delegation, which had over 60 Ghanaians masquerading as journalists when they were not. That scandal brought a lot of embarrassment to this country. You asked the deputy minister to step aside pending investigations. He claims that the investigations conducted by the CID have cleared this, public officer. All Ghanaians and the media have been asking for is for him to make this report public in line with the principles of transparency, probity, and accountability, which he swore to uphold. But till date, he has failed to do so. The claims of the president cannot be true. But even, in fact, I need to make the point that it is wrong for us to create the impression and proceed on that basis that it is the NDC or the opposition or opponents of President Akufo-Addo who are tagging him with corruption. That preposition cannot be true. And President Akufo-Addo must stop seeing his critics as opponents. The CDD is not an opponent of President Akufo-Addo. They have discovered that since 2017, when he assumed office, Ghana has lost a whopping 9.6 billion Ghana cedis through corruption.
But Sami, you make that point, and the president today also provides details that 21 of your colleagues in the NDC who were part of the John Mahama administration are currently standing trial for corruption or causing financial loss to the state, amounting to 700 plus million cedis. Some say that figure makes it hard for the NDC to have any moral authority on this subject. What's your reaction to that?
Hold on. The president is a lawyer. Abu Jinapor is a lawyer. And I think he's articulated in this interview that there is a provision of presumption of innocence of all criminally accused persons under the laws of this country. The fact that you call people before court, to stand prosecution for their alleged acts of corruption does not mean that they are indeed guilty. And that can never
be evidence of one's commitment to the fight against corruption. As a matter of fact, the easiest part in the fight against corruption is the prosecution of one's opponents. The true commitment of a president to the fight must be measured not by the number of political opponents he has been able to hold before courts of competent jurisdiction, but by his own commitment in prosecuting his own appointees. President Mahama did that in the Jida matter when he allowed for those who were indicted by investigations in the matter to stand prosecution. Some of them have been convicted, are in jail, and that included a certain member of parliament, an NDC certain member of parliament. In the Dikihama, matter, merely dreaming of amassing wealth by an official of the Mahama administration was not countenance. She was asked to, as a government. In the Smarties deal, references were made, specific actions were taken. Have you seen any such actions being taken by President Akufo-Addo? In the Ghana Export Promotion Authority scandal, for example, today, as we speak, as a CEO and his deputy who approved for themselves illegal clothing allowances, rent allowances, and so on, refunded same. The 1.8 million Ghana cedis that Mr. Sigri, the dismissed CEO of the NYA, paid to Preforce Limited under that corrupt, illegal contract which beat the public procurement law. Has any refunds been made to the state?
But you acknowledge, the president mentions today that the individual in question of the YEA has been sacked now. Just hold the line for me briefly. Let me bring in Mr. Jinapo. Mr. Jinapo, so you listen to the NDC. They make the point today that you cannot blame the tagging of the president as corrupt or a clearing agent on them, and that he cites credible reports either from GI or CCDD that talks about these corruption issues being a real threat today under the watch of the current president.
Well, thank you, Ivan. First of all, I'm happy that Joy FM prides themselves to have a discerning audience. So I'm sure our listeners will discern through the issue. But second of all, the NDC, Ivan, DS is how to win political power for very ignorable purposes. I mean, that's all they are interested in. Deliberate, concocted stories. You pointed out to him that the finance minister has gone to court and set aside these portions of the Shraj report, which he's talking about, and he won't listen to you, go on and on about it. The case of the Bosch incident, for instance, a committee was established and chaired by the CEO of the Chamber of Bulk Oil Distribution Companies. Investigations were conducted. No adverse findings were made. In fact, in the case of the Shraj report on the finance minister, I don't know of any adverse findings that which were supposed to have been made against him. There were findings that he found unsatisfactory. He went to the Court of Appeal. Those findings were expunged from the report, and yet you will have the NDC cite that as examples of corruption. I'm not particularly disturbed, or I'm not so interested in being drawn into NDC, MPP argument and so on and so, because no matter, it doesn't matter what evidence you put before them, they will still go on and on and on, because for their political purposes. Today, the president has set the record straight. He's given instances where allegations of corruptions were leveled against appointees of his government. He's acted decisively. He's acted within the confines of the law. That is how a government works. And even, let me point this out to you. In an unprecedented fashion, for the first time under the fourth Republican dispensation, 2 bipartisan parliamentary committees of inquiries have been established under Akufo-Addo's government. It's never happened before. The first one was to investigate Honorable Boachi Ajako. The second one was to investigate a cabinet minister, no mean a cabinet minister than the high-ranking cabinet minister for trade and industry, Honorable Alan Kojo Tremantin. When the issue of the Ford expedition came up, calls were made in Parliament. The then minority, led by Osei Chairman Sabunsu, moved the motion to call for a bipartisan parliamentary inquiry into the Ford expedition saga. Not an allegation against a minister, an allegation against the head of government, the head of state, the president at the time. Calls were made for bipartisan parliamentary inquiry. It was torpedoed by the NDC majority. And I want to say, I said this when we were in opposition, I want to repeat it, Ivan. In all humility and modesty, for more than 4 decades of Akufo-Addo's public service, he carries an unblemished record, even as president, with all their cacophony of allegations and unfounded
fabricated stories about corruption, they have never been able to marshal the courage to level a single allegation against Akufo-Addo as a person.
Well, I want to say a big thank you to you, Mr. Jinapo. We just run out of time on this. Examine if you stay with me. You want to join us now on Newsnight because there's more from the President's address to the Bar Conference today that we're bringing you on Newsnight, which starts right now.